New job data and a pending decision from the Fed on interest rates, what this all means for Nevada, plus
it got to the point where I would plead with the airlines of, okay, whoever has New York flights, can we get them out? They needed to get home.
Retiring Clark County Director of Aviation, Rosemary Vasiliadis, reflects on the 9/11 terrorist attacks that stranded thousands of travelers in Las Vegas. That's this week on Nevada Week.
Support for Nevada Week is provided by Senator William H. Hernstedt.
Welcome to Nevada Week. I'm Amber Renee Dixon. A local theater wants you to see more independent films on the big screen and only on the big screen. That story is ahead, but we begin with the economy. Annual revisions from the Bureau of Labor Statistics show the U.S. jobs market was weaker than originally reported. The Bureau says employers actually added 911,000 fewer jobs between April 2024 and March 2025. So how many jobs did Nevada actually add? And what does this new data mean for the Federal Reserve, which could announce interest rate cuts on September 17th? For that, we bring in John Restrepo, principal of Las Vegas-based RCG Economics, and Andrew Woods, director of UNLV's Center for Business and Economic Research. Gentlemen, welcome back to Nevada.
Thank you, Amber.
Thank you, Amber.
So the report that I just brought up, 911,000 fewer jobs added in the U.S. and in Nevada, 3,100 fewer jobs added. Does that mean much to you? What do you think of that, Andrew?
Well, it means a lot in terms of what we're looking at for trend and rebasing our numbers. You know, these revisions are common. They always have been happening for decades. The statistical methods that the BLS uses, have to be checked with. What they do is they actually check it with unemployment data coming out of the states. So the revisions weren't surprising. I think what's been more concerning over the summer is that we've seen that hiring has slowed. And then number of job openings has started to slow down too, as well nationally in the economy. You have seen a slight uptick in the unemployment rate. Of course, it hasn't gone up as much as maybe some have forecasted, which maybe also still points to that firms are holding on to their workers, but they're not letting go of their workers. So we're kind of at this weird point in the economic and business cycle where the economy's trucking along, but they're not hiring workers as much as they were in years past, which means a slowing economy, but it's still positive. So what do you do with that information, and where do we go from here? Which I know that's why John and I are on here to talk about.
Yeah, John, where do we go with this information?
Yeah.
What do you make of that info?
Yeah, let me add to what Andrew said. Remember, this correction that we just saw, this 900,000 per person, we haven't seen anything this major since the early 1990s.
So it is a big deal.
So it is a big deal in terms of the level of correction. The fact that they're correcting things with the quarterly data, correcting the monthly data with the quarterly data is not unusual, but the size of the correction. So what's causing that? It's probably because the economy's evolved and changed over time, and maybe the methodologies at some of these federal agencies, the Bureau of Labor Statistics or the Bureau of Economic Analysis, need to be updated to 2025. It could be the way they survey, how they survey, things like that. So some methodological advancements and innovations need to take place now, particularly with all the advancements we have in technology to do that. We also had in this most recent set of numbers the impact of all of the deportations, immigration issues that we've seen in the last 12 months. And so that comes into play as well. And so there's a lot of kind of noise right now in the data, but we're pretty sure, and you mentioned it earlier, these are not, the BLS and BEA are not political organizations. They're statisticians, they're number nerds like Andrew and I. And so they're just trying to do the right thing. Maybe their methodologies need to be improved, but these are not people that are cooking numbers or make any administration look bad or good.
And one of the issues you get there is since the COVID pandemic, across the board response to surveys for the government data has declined, and particularly that one is below, I think, at or below 40% response rate, whereas before the pandemic, it was at or above 60%.
Yeah.
And so you're just going to get these wild swings in these numbers because they have to go back and check them, but you're getting lower and lower response rates.
Right. And part of that, real quickly, just to add to that, I'm sorry not to belabor the point, is, we've cut back the budgets on these agencies that do the data. So now we have fewer people with a lot of work they have to do to maintain this information, with business depend on it and all these sorts of things.
And changes in leadership
and
as well.
And so it's kind of funny. You can't cut someone's budget and then expect them to do the same level of due diligence and data confirmations. Someone said the other day, yesterday on the news about this, an economist said, it's like cutting your neighbor's tires on his car, and when they don't move the car, blaming the neighbor. Right? And so you have to just be very careful. So a lot of it is budgetary issues and things like that too as well.
You brought up increased immigration enforcement and its impact on the jobs market. Have we seen that in Nevada? Has it had an impact so far for either of you, do you think?
We haven't seen it quite yet. I think there hasn't been a lot of this ICE enforcement happening here in Southern Nevada or in Northern Nevada in the agricultural economy. We haven't seen that quite yet. Will it happen? We don't know. That's going to be a political decision, right? What cities, what metros, what states are being affected by this ICE activity. So no, we have not seen that quite yet. What we're starting to see more, though, is slowly seeping in the impact of tariffs.
One more question on immigration.
Okay.
There is increased immigration enforcement in California. How does that end up impacting Nevada, or does it at all?
Well, so UNLV Center for Business Economic Research, we do the population forecast. We've been doing that since 1997. We look at not just the year ahead, but the next 60 years. And a large driver of our population growth, especially since the pandemic, has been immigration, which could be coming from California. But we also know California in general is 60% of our growth comes from the population moving from California. So there's this question that we have is if you have lower international migration in the United States, that's going to filter through to the Nevada economy, because a lot of those workers backfill the jobs that domestic workers that live here in Nevada don't necessarily want to do, which is a lot of these entry-level jobs, say in leisure and hospitality or construction, which are very much kind of drivers of growth in Southern Nevada.
Right.
So it's not immediate in terms of like month to month, but we're anticipating, and when we go revise our numbers in February, March, and April, we're expecting to see a big impact on limiting our ability to grow, because who's going to take these entry-level jobs?
Right. That's right. And the other thing, too, tied into that, Andrew makes an excellent point, is that, an international visitation is an important part of the Nevada experience. I think 10 or 15%, I can't remember the number.
It's about 11 to 12.
12% or foreign travelers. And so when we're fighting with foreigners, when we're threatening the Canadians to make them the 51st state, all that other stuff, and we're charging Canadian or foreign visitors an extra fee to come here, and all these sorts of things, and dealing with creating kind of anxiety among our allies. They're not coming here as frequently, so that's all part of the immigration discussion as well as a foreign visitor.
And the drop in tourism that we have covered here on this show.
Right.
But tariffs, you mentioned, what impact have they had thus far?
It depends on the product, it depends on the country, but it's still flowing through the system, right? And so we're starting to see, like Andrew mentioned earlier, I think offline, there's certain consumer products that are going up. I'm noticing where price at a restaurant, for example. My wife and I were in LA visiting my daughter this weekend, and we noticed that the prices haven't changed dramatically. The portions have gotten smaller. So you have these subtle little things like this, right? But we're starting to see the prices seep in. We're probably not going to see the full impact of the tariffs probably till the end of this year or early the first quarter, where we start really seeing the effects of it. Right now, businesses are absorbing. The importers are absorbing it in China and India a little bit. The prices have kept the prices down. The American company importers have been absorbing, so to benefit, so they don't want to scare the consumer. But at some point, they're going to stop absorbing these things. They're going to start passing it on.
And I think you see it in these earnings reports. So Home Depot, Walmart, Amazon have all said, like, we can't hold back much longer or at all anymore.
We can't absorb this anymore. Right?
Yeah, and someone's paying them, because every month you get the numbers from Treasury on how much they're collecting in tariffs, which is somewhere between 200 and 300 billion a month.
Right.
So someone's paying that. It's most likely the companies that will
importers.
eventually pass it on to us, because consumers, we will pay it.
Consumers could certainly be paying much more attention to this around Christmas time.
That's when you'll see it, yeah. It's interesting, because I saw a weird statistic the other day. 90% of all our toys that we buy in this country for in Christmas items and things like that, you know, decorations are all Chinese. And so what is that going to do at some point? And this is the thing that I think we underestimated as a policy. Countries have national pride. They're not going to sit back and not respond because it's the United States demanding something. They're going to fight back in the best way they can. So that we're still waiting for all of this to play out.
Okay. Will the Fed be lowering interest rates? What do you think, Andrew, and by how much?
I think there's a very strong possibility for a 25 basis point cut next week. I think the real question is, will they do it again before the end of the year? Yeah.
What do you think?
I agree, totally. They're going to increase it by 25 basis points or 1/4%, and they're going to see what to help prop up the job market because it's getting weak.
Increase or decrease?
Decrease, I'm sorry. And then to prop up the job market, you know, stop the job market from going into kind of some kind of downward spin. But they're going to watch it carefully because inflation is still there. So they have to be careful not to create too much demand, right? Because they have to tame inflation. So it's kind of a two conflicting set of metrics that they're being looked at. But yeah, they will definitely decrease it at the end of the next week for sure.
And the president has argued that had they done this earlier, that could have, you know, it helped with allowing for more borrowing and then allowing employers to hire more people. Perhaps the jobs report wouldn't be as bad as it is if the Fed had lowered interest rates already. What do you think of that argument?
I think that's assuming that the Fed is in the driver's seat of the economy right now.
Right.
I don't think the Fed is in the driver's seat of the economy right
Right.
now. It's the policies out of Washington, D.C. are driving the economy and affecting business decisions. It certainly can help or hinder what the Fed does.
Right.
But they're no longer in the driver's seat. And so that's how I would frame it.
What presidential policies have had some positive impacts? Perhaps the maintenance of the tax cuts that were already in place from his first administration. He implemented them, and those are staying at the rate that they are.
Yeah, I mean that's worked. The other thing that's nothing, it's you don't want to do it broad based, but it can work in certain situations. Tariffs can work when it's strategic things like computer chips and rare earth metals and things like that you need for national defense. Things like that. In a targeted way, limited tariffs can work. I think the president did this his first term. President Biden continued them. But when you have these broad-based, tariff everything, including, coffee from Brazil, whatever it is, it makes no sense. But so tariffs in and of themselves in a limited way can work. The continuation of the tax cuts from the forget the name of the Jobs Act, the Tax Economy and Jobs Act, whatever the tax bill that the president passed a number of years ago in Congress. I think it continued those probably best than not. We also have to understand that they were concentrated in certain groups too. And so let's make sure consumers are also benefiting from these tax cuts, and it's just not the large corporations and the super wealthy. So that's that. But in general, I think it's a good thing.
I think too for workers here in Southern Nevada, as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, the no tax on tips and the break on overtime. We estimated last year when there was all this discussion on the campaign trail, right around 18% of the workforce here in Nevada would benefit from those kind of policies because they're dependent on tips or there's the overtime as part of their job. So assuming that actually it occurs in the way that we all assumed it's going to. Now, I think John brought up when we were talking before this is that there's these time periods.
There are
this is
limitations.
Not a permanent thing, and of course we know that they're in D.C. though, just because it's temporary, it ends up kind of sometimes being permanent as well. So it'll be interesting how this evolves with when they go back and do more tax changes, another reconciliation bill, the budget process right now. But I do think that does help benefit our workers here in Southern Nevada because we have an economy largely driven with on service work, or you have a lot of workers who get overtime as well.
The only footnote I would add to what Andrew and I are saying, you have to adjust spending.
Yeah.
So with these tax cuts, the One Big Beautiful Bill and the previous tax, let's talk about the One Big Beautiful. You also have to have companion spending cuts, and that's what no one wants to deal with, and that's what's causing the deficit and what's causing the issues that we're having right now. What's the latest? Where are we on the deficit?
We're north of what, 23 trillion?
Yeah, something like this.
Yet,
And I want to say,
So you have to have both, and no one wants to have a cut. That's the problem.
well, you basically you
in
need to raise
federal
revenue.
offices.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you either need to raise revenue or cut spending. But I would also say, going back to the Fed conversation about interest rate cuts, it won't really matter if we don't have the credibility that we have our debt under control.
Correct.
Because a lot of interest rates that we pay, whether it's on a new home or a car, for example, a lot of those are actually more determined by the bond market, which is dependent on the confidence of our ability to pay our debt.
And that's and a lot of foreign countries and investors are buyers of our bonds.
own
Yeah.
America's
So that comes in.
And you
debt.
saw that going into the jobs report last week, that there was this unwinding between short-term and long-term interest
Right.
rates because the bond market is really queasy about all of this debt that we keep
Yeah.
selling.
John,
Yeah.
I think ahead of this off camera, you described it as messy.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. So we'll leave it there. Thank you both for joining Nevada
Thank you,
Week.
Amber.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Amber.
it.
We
Appreciate
move
it.
now to a new endeavor for the Beverly Theater. Las Vegas's only independent film house and performance venue recently launched Ink Films, a theatrical distribution arm. Unlike film distribution, theatrical distribution focuses on releasing films that can only be seen in theaters. So why did the film house go in this direction? Joining me for more on that is Kip Kelly, founding creative director and chief experience officer at the Beverly Theater. Kip, thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Nevada Week.
What an absurd job title that is. I don't know it's so long. I'm sorry you had to read that, but
Did
thanks
you
for
make,
having me.
Did you make that up?
I did not. I had a part of it, but the first part was actually Beverly Rogers, who, for those of you who don't know, is the namesake of the theater, and also the foremost champion of arts and education in Southern Nevada, I believe. And she's always talked about arts and education as it affects people's lives, not just let's save the arts, let's fund the arts, let's protect the arts just for art's sake or just for education's sake. It's really about how those things affect or change or transforms people's lives. And so the theatrical distribution arm of this really, when we started it, it really had to do more with, well, we've built this brick and mortar theater and we have all these roads that go to and from when it comes to films coming into the theater, because we do everything at the theater. And so we really kind of built this system and these roads that can go two ways. If we can receive films and we can book films, then we could probably distribute them. Although it wasn't that easy. I just felt like that made sense at the time, and so we said, let's try it. And the mission of Ink Films specifically is really, we want to work with filmmakers and partners who are committed to their mission. They want to get their film on screen. They want to get their film in front of a broader audience or a national audience. And of course, everyone wants to do that, so it's not like it's hard to find those people, but there's a lot of really good films that don't have a distribution home or don't have kind of that support to help get them into the theaters and on the big screen. And we, of course, have a vested interest in getting people into theaters. We want people to come to our theater, so we want to work with titles that encourage people to get out to other people's theaters as well. We kind of have, we want to be a part of people's night out, you know, and so that kind of goes both ways with what we do at the Beverly Theater and then also what we do with Ink Films.
You want to help bring back the time before COVID.
I don't know that we can do that, but I think it's if you aim for the stars, you land on the moon. And I do think that there is still something very magical about going to the movies and watching something with friends or with other people. I love to stream. I think streaming is a powerful tool, but that's a very personal thing, kind of people's night in. If I told people what I streamed at home, they'd probably, you know, there's guilty pleasures. Like I leave that to the people at home. What do you want to stream? You know, for me, it might be some Dateline episode from 2005, you know, like we choose what we choose at home. But when we talk about being a part of people's night out, it's about encouraging and getting them to inspire or to create or to think or to engage and be a part of the community, which we like. We like doing that.
Talking about changing people's lives, this inaugural release in particular is going to help the animators that are featured in this film.
Yeah.
How?
Animation Mixtape actually is a kind of a spin-off of something called The Animation Show, which came out in about, I think it was 2003. Don Hertzfeldt and Mike Judge, who are world-renowned animators, came out with this touring animated shorts festival called The Animation Show, and is within partnership with MTV. And the ethos of that was really, and I think the quote exactly is, to release animators from the dungeon of internet exhibition. something like that. And even in 2003, they get off of the internet and go see the movies, and that was 22 years ago.
Wow.
And so we went to Don and thought that this would be a good idea to kind of do it again. And he is a big fan of independent animators, obviously. He's one himself, but he's a little more big time now. He's got a couple Oscar nominations under his belt, and he's done a lot of big things. And he really wanted to work and to put this project together to benefit other independent animators who haven't had a chance to have their stuff on the big screen yet. So not every project we do will be like this, but this one was very close to the heart of what we do at Ink Films and what Don and Mike created in 2003. So to kind of bring it back to life in 2025 with kind of the same goal in mind, which is just to get people into theaters and to help filmmakers. But I do think people who are fans of animation are going to love this, and if they happen to bring somebody who hates animation or is not a fan, I think this is a good one to kind of get your feet wet in, because it introduces you to some old animation and some new animation, and all in the spirit of Don Hertzfeldt, who's beloved as an animator.
And you mentioned that he released a trailer for this, and
Yep.
we do have that, so let's show some of that right now.
All right.
Okay, so I've seen this a couple of times now,
Yeah.
and I laughed, and I don't know why.
Yeah, me either. So a lot of people are probably not familiar. These are kind of Don's signature characters. And we were talking off camera, I was explaining to some of the crew here. We've been calling them clouds, others have called them sheep. Don himself has no idea what they are. So you can call them, yeah, that's also his voice doing all of those. Those are just kind of his characters that make appearances throughout a lot of his films and a lot of his projects. And there's other parts of that trailer as the intro. If you go see it in film, you'll see it's not just the trailer, it's also the intro to the film. And he's got some pretty gnarly characters that pop up after that.
What would you tell a viewer who just watched that and said, what in the world was that?
I think that's exactly what you should expect when you go see anything animated in theaters. Like I've, as somebody who's watched a lot of animation now over the last year, I still don't get a lot of it, but I think that's okay. A lot of it's open for interpretation. It's just supposed to be fun. Like those guys are those clouds, whatever they are just inherently fun, and you laugh at them and you don't know why.
Kip Kelly, thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you, Amber. I
Nevada
appreciate
Week.
it. I love PBS. I love Nevada Week. Thank you, guys.
And we end now with a look back on the local impact of the 9/11 terrorist attacks that happened 24 years ago. After terrorists hijacked 4 planes, killing 2,977 people when they crashed into the World Trade Center Twin Towers in New York City, the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, operations at airports and airspace around the United States paused for 2 days. In Las Vegas, it took an unprecedented effort to get the thousands of visitors stranded here home, and it was a defining moment in the career of Clark County Director of Aviation, Rosemary Vasiliadis. At the time, she was a deputy director and had the daunting task of reopening a major airport. She shared those memories in a recent episode of Nevada Week in person.
As you know, I was there at 9/11, and I was there when TSA was born. And it was hard for a lot of airports to bring that in because they had such command over a huge part of the operation. But we know here in Las Vegas, we wanted everyone to feel safe, you know, as a discretionary and a leisure destination. So I embraced them, saying, okay, it's side by side. What do you need? What are your rules? And what are we going to do to make it feel for our passengers to come back because they know they're going to be safe?
Whereas other airports may have had kind of a power struggle with the introduction of the TSA?
That's exactly right.
What do you remember about the days after 9/11?
It's hard to remember because there was no sleep, but it was very difficult. I I actually didn't know everything that happened that day until the year anniversary because we had to get through that day. You know, airspace was never closed. Commercial airports were never closed. You know, I was the one that was there, that was in charge. And we kept on getting security rules from FAA because that's who had the security regulations at the time. Every few hours. But what we did know here in Las Vegas is we had 90,000 hotel rooms that had a very healthy occupancy rate, and they wanted to get home. So when we reopened, we knew what was going to happen, and they did. They all came back. We had to literally shut down our roadway system and had, you know, passenger snake queues to be able to get them processed to go back home. And that was something that was our responsibility, and we had to do the best we could.
Gosh, I didn't think about that aspect. All of the visitors that were staying here in Las Vegas at the time wanting to get home.
It was heart-wrenching because the people from New York couldn't get through to their families by salve. Remember, at that time, everything was just so, you know, overpowered. So it got to the point where I would plead with the airlines of, okay, whoever has New York flights, can we get them out? They needed to get home. This was 3 days later. That's a long time not being able to contact your family.
After serving more than 28 years as an airport leader in Clark County, Rosemary Vasiliadis retires on September 12th. She shared more of her experiences with us on Nevada Week in person. You can find her episode as well as other resources discussed on this show on our website, vegaspbs.org/Nevada Week.